Hello, and welcome to the Chief Architect Building Demonstration. My name is Kayla, and I will be presenting for you today. So today, we are going to take a look at the building tools within Chief Architect. We're going to focus on tools that help you create a good set of construction documents, and we'll do so by creating a home from beginning to end. So we'll start by building the shell and dimensioning it. We'll look at our door and window tools, then we'll build a foundation level and a second floor, plus stairs leading to it. Then we'll build the roof of the home and take a look at our framing options, followed by our elevation tools. We'll look at our materials list and schedule tools. Finally, we'll take all of those elements and combine them together into our construction document or our layout page. So let's jump right into the software. I'm going to be working in Chief Architect Premier X11 today. Taking a look at the interface, so what we're looking at right now, we have a blank drawing sheet here, our most common building tools on the architectural toolbar up here. So for instance, drawing walls, placing windows and cabinets, and roofs and framing. And then we have a larger array of tools in the full menu at the top. So the build menu contains all of our building related tools. And if you were to look under the wall options, you'll see there's quite a few more options than are under the simple build wall tools here. And these toolbars are all customizable, so you can move these around or add and remove tools to make it work well for you. Chief Architect is largely a drag and drop system. To begin building the home, I'll start with grabbing our wall tool. So I'm going to go to Build, Wall, and I'm going to grab just a straight exterior wall. Then I'll move my cursor into the plan and click and drag to draw the wall. As I draw, you'll see a temporary dimension running parallel to it, letting you know how long it is. I'm not going to worry about exact dimensions yet. I'm just going to draw the general shell of the home, and then I'll dimension after it's drawn. As we're drawing in 2D, the 3D model of the home is being built simultaneously. So once we connect our walls to form a room, we can then take a look at the model by using one of our camera tools found here. I'm going to create a floor camera, which creates a dollhouse effect, looking down into our structure with the ceiling removed. And now I'm going to tile my two views by dragging this tab out and releasing once I see that blue square showing where the view is going to drop. And in both 2D and 3D, I can zoom in and reposition my view using the scroll wheel on my mouse. The defaults of the software define the way that the architectural tools function and how the home is built. So the ways that the walls and floors look, the materials that they use, and the framing structure built into the wall, the floor and ceiling platform, which are already defined just by drawing out the room, all of those are defaults that you can set up ahead of time and save for future plans, so that when you draw a home such as this one, you don't have to change much after it's drawn. So we are going to alter these walls a bit, but first let's dimension the home. I'm going to use my automatic exterior dimensions. If I change the scale of my dimension defaults before I draw my dimensions, I can ensure that they're styled and scaled the way that I'll eventually need on my construction documents. I'm going to stay in 1/4 inch scale dimension defaults. Then I'll select my automatic exterior dimensions. So now I'm going to select a wall that I want to move, and I can either select its perpendicular dimension, which is going to move this wall. So I'm going to select this wall, select the dimension, and I'm going to type in 15 feet 9 inches. Then I'll hit enter, and you can see that wall move. Or I can select its parallel dimension. So when I do that, I have the option to decide whether or not the top of the wall or the bottom of the wall is going to move, or whether it's going to move in both directions. I'm going to select the bottom, and I'm going to change this dimension to 9 feet 10 inches, and hit enter, and you'll see the bottom of the wall moved, and any wall that was attached to it moved as well. So now I'm going to pause and finish dimensioning my walls, and I'm going to add a few bump outs in these exterior walls as well. So now that we have the exterior shell situated correctly, I'm going to select my wall tool, and I'm going to draw my interior walls. Having the shell dimension first means that most of these walls are going to be in the correct dimension as I draw them. And I can even draw walls in my 3D view, simply by finding my snap and drawing them out. And again, I'm going to pause while I finish drawing my interior walls. Now before we go any further, I want to take a look at the finished product. I've exported the home as a 3D viewer file. With Chief Architect, you can store 3D models on the cloud and either share links of the home for you, clients, or friends to view on a web browser like I'm doing here today, or to view on one of our mobile applications called 3D Viewer, available for both Android and Apple devices. So if we take a look at this finished home, you can see that I have 3 exterior wall types. I have a board and batten, which is what I've drawn so far, but I also have a stone wall, and I have this horizontal wooden plank wall. So back in the plan, I'm going to make some edits. I can group select the walls that I want to change by holding down my Control key while I select them, and then I can open them up together to modify them. So these walls that I've opened are going to be full stone walls. So I'm going to come down to my wall types in my wall specification, and here we're using this wall that we've called siding 6_2, which is my board and batten wall. I can select define, and I'm actually going to change this existing wall type. Now by doing this, I'm going to alter all of the walls in my plan that are currently named this, which is what I want to do. I just want to call it board and batten 6. So all the walls in my plan with that style are going to be renamed. Now I'm going to choose another wall style. Now I'm going to get as close as I can to my stone wall type. So I'm going to take this brick 6 wall, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to call it stone-6. So it's a 6-inch framed stone wall. Then I'm going to take this brick texture and I'm just going to click on the texture, and it will open up to my library where I can select the material that I want it to become. Now currently this is a 3-inch thick brick, so we'll want to modify this to whatever the thickness of the stone. And we may want to change the fill style. This is what it's going to look like in my 2D view. I can also change over to see what it's going to look like in 3D. Once I like the changes that I've made, I'll select OK. You can see those stone 6 walls. Then I'll select OK again, and you can see that change apply. Now if we take a look at the home again, I also am using that stone on other walls that are going to be what Chief Architect calls pony walls. So they're half stone, half board and batten. So I'm going to select all of those walls, again by holding down my Control key to grab them all. And once I have all the walls that I want to change, I'll go ahead and select to open them up. And under wall types, I'm going to check this box to make it a pony wall. It's going to drop in that brick 6 that we looked at earlier. I'm going to change over to the stone 6 wall that we created. Then I can change how high off of the floor that is. So this means that from the floor up to 48 inches is going to be the lower wall type, and then from there up to whatever my ceiling height is going to be the second wall type. I can also define how it's going to look in my plan view. So if we look back at how this wall looks in plan view, right now we're selecting to show the upper wall, so all of the layers of the upper wall, and then just have an outline of that lower wall so we can see what's going on there. We can also do the upper wall outline and the lower wall, or show both together. I'm going to go back to that default and show the upper wall but with an outline of the lower one. That way they visually look different than my full stone walls. So then we'll select OK, and you can see those pony walls. Now I'm going to select these garage walls, or what will become the garage, and we're going to do the final wall type. This front wall also will become that horizontal paneled. So I'm going to open them up, and now before we make any changes this time, I kind of want to go through all of the options that are available to modify this wall. So here we're in what's called our wall specification. So when we open up any object, you'll see whatever that object is and then specification. So this is a dialog allowing us to modify whatever object we've opened. So you'll see all the options available that are specific to, in this case, modifying walls. So there are quite a few options here on the general panel. Under structure, here we can define some double wall options as well as some framing options for that wall. Here we define what the roof is doing on the wall. So we haven't built our roof yet, but we'll look at this quite a bit more later when we build the roof. If we had a foundation wall, we would have some options here that we'd want to take a look at. We've already looked at this wall types panel, and you can see I have this little box inside this checkbox, which tells me that some of the walls that I have opened are marked as pony wall and some are not. So I'm going to go ahead and just check that and uncheck it to make sure that none of those walls are pony walls. And I'm going to switch the wall type over to be a wall that I've already created, which is just a siding 6 horizontal wood. So it's that wood planking. And notice if we go into define, I've actually modified the fill style for the wall so that it looks quite a bit different than the other walls, so that when we're looking at our plan view we can visually see the difference between our horizontal paneled walls versus our stone walls versus our board and batten walls. So then some other options, wall cap, it wouldn't be applicable for this one, but for our pony walls, if we had wanted to add a wall cap, here's where we could have done that. Wall covering, this has to do most of the time with something like wallpaper. If you're going to have multiple colors along a single wall or multiple materials along a wall, the wall covering can help with that. If we had a railing, then the rail style, newels, balusters, and rails would define how that railing looks. Railings are effectively walls in Chief Architect. And then how we're going to label that wall. So later when we take a look at our wall legend, this will become a little bit more important. So we'll select OK to apply the change so you can see those walls change. So now the only other wall types that I want to change are, I need some 6-inch interior walls. So I'm going to select all of the walls, again by holding down my control key, that are going to become 6-inch walls. And that's either because they are bearing walls or because they're plumbing walls. So once I have all those selected, I'm going to open them up, and under wall types I'm going to change them to an interior 6 wall. And so with that, we've made all the modifications to the walls. So you can see how easy it is for us to not only draw out the walls, but made some pretty quick changes to them. And we've set up everything that we need to be able to do our wall legend later. Now I'm going to place my windows and doors. I'm going to start by just dropping in a single window in the front here, and then we're going to open it up and make some modifications. I'll double click to open it up, and here in the window specification, I'll start by adjusting the dimensions of the window. So I'm going to make it a 64-inch high window, and currently the floor to top is 78 inches, so we just want to make sure that there's enough room for our header height, which there's plenty of room there. And I'm going to go through some of the options that we have to edit. Before I do that, I'm going to change my window type. We're going to do a single hung window. And then the bottom component size, I'm going to change to 20 inches. So it'll be 20 inches high, and then the rest of the window will continue after that. Under options, I can choose whether or not it's a recessed or has tempered glass. I can adjust the casing here, so I can add a casing profile, so a molding around that casing, change its width and depth and how much it overlaps. Here are some double wall options. I can add in a lintel, I'm not going to. Same with the sill, I'm not going to have a sill on this window, but I can have one on both the exterior and interior if I want to. Here I'm going to adjust the middle width, so that's going to be my middle component. I'm going to change it to 4 inches. And under frame, I can decide whether or not it's going to have a frame, and then what the sides and top of that are going to be. Here I can add in some lights, so these are going to change my window panes so I can have multiple. I'm not going to have any on mine, but I also could adjust the muntin width if I were going to add in some lights here. And there are different types of window panes that we can add in, the different styles of window that we can create. If I wanted to, I could add in a shape, so if we take a look at the final, I do have a couple of angled windows here. I'm not going to draw them today, but I did that simply by matching the roof. So here's that match roof option where it's just going to follow the roof line so that it angles in exactly the same slope. Or I can choose exactly how much that's going to angle if I wanted to, but I'll undo that. Here we have an arch, so different types of arches. You can add in some treatments. Those are curtains and blinds, shutters. Here we can decide what our framing is going to be. So we have some general framing defaults that we'll take a look at later, but these are if we wanted to adjust the framing on an opening by opening basis. Increase or decrease our rough opening, that kind of thing. We do have the ability to work our energy values and adjust them here. Again, everything we can change the layer that it's on if we want to, materials. So then I'll select OK to apply any changes we've made. And then I'm going to copy that window. I'm going to select it and copy, and then paste it over here as well. So it'll have all the same settings, including the height of the window. So now I'm going to place two windows here in front. And I'm going to open both of these up. Again, I'm going to hold down my control key to select both of them. Open them, and I'm going to change their height to 28 inches. I'm going to change the floor to bottom to 12 inches, so there starts 12 inches off of the floor. Then I'll select OK, so you can see that change apply. And I'm going to select both of these windows in my 2D view. I'm going to use my Center Object tool. So this is a handy tool where I can center along any object, in this case along this wall, to make sure they're centered there. Then, with both of those still selected, I'm going to use something called Transform Replicate. So this is a great tool to be able to do precise movements, and I can also copy while I make movements. So I'm going to copy these windows twice, and I'm going to move each copy 30 inches in the Z delta, so that's up in my plan. Then I'll select OK, and you can see that change applied. So Transform Replicate is a really handy way to make copies of things or to move things very precisely. So now I'm going to place a front door in my plan. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can focus on the area we're working here. I'm going to grab my door tool and just drop in a door. Now Chief Architect can tell whether or not I'm placing an exterior door, so that's a door leading to an exterior area, or an interior door. So if I zoom around and place a door inside, you can see that that's a completely different style of door because I have a different style for my exterior versus my interior. Now I'm going to use a tool that's new in X11. That's my fixed door tool. So I'm going to select my door tool, and one of the options here is a fixed door, and that's going to be for my side lights. Then I'm going to open it up to make some changes, and I want to match the height of my exterior door, which is 90 inches tall, and I want to increase the bottom frame, so that's this section right here. I'm going to increase it to 32 inches. Then I'm going to come down to materials, and I'm going to shift select all of my materials at once, deselect my glass standard, again by holding down my control key, and then I'm going to select a material. So down in my plan materials, I have a collection of all the materials already in my plan. And I'm going to grab the color black. Select OK. I can see all of the changes there. Select OK again. And now it matches the style of the door. So now in the back here, I'm going to use another new door feature in X11. So I'm going to grab my sliding door, click to place that in there, and I'm going to increase the dimensions first. So I'm going to grab this door, and you can see I have temporary dimensions showing how large this door is in my 3D view. Then, once I have the dimensions about where I want them, I'm going to open them up, and I can be more accurate. So I'm going to change that to 218 inches. And under Options, I now have the ability to increase the number of door panels. So I'm going to increase this to have 6 door panels across there. And again, I'm going to come down to my materials, shift select all of them, control deselect my glass, and I'm going to select that black material again. Once I've applied all of the changes, so then I'm going to select OK, and I've done all that in my 3D view. Here in 2D I might want to just make sure that the dimension is accurate. So I'm going to have it be 2 feet 6 inches from the wall. So now I'm going to pause and place the rest of my doors and windows. Alright, so now I have just one more door to place. So I'm going to grab my door tool, and I want to show you When we're selecting the door, if we move the cursor around before we place, you can see it's changing that swing side for us. But also when I click down to place the door, before I release, I can move that swing and hinge style around until it's in the right position. Also, after it's placed, if it doesn't have the right side, for instance that one we placed earlier, we placed it in 3D so we weren't paying attention to the hinge side, I can select that door, and down in my edit toolbar I can select to change that swing side. I can also use my rotation handles, you can see their little triangles here, to change how far open they show in my 2D view, which will also affect if I choose to show it open in 3D. So if I were to take this door and show it open in 3D, it will stay open exactly the way that it's shown in our 2D view. So it can be all the way closed in 2D, or at a 90-degree angle, or all the way open. Now if I decide that I don't like the style of door, I'm going to zoom in on one of these interior doors. I'm going to select this door and double click to open it up. And again, we have quite a few options to edit here. We can change our dimensions and the type of door that it is. So if this was actually a doorway or was a pocket or a sliding door, we could edit that here. I'm going to leave it a hinged door. But here in door style, I'm going to go into my library. And here in my library, I have all the door styles available. If I click on a folder in my library, I can see a preview of the different styles we have. Then I can choose one, select OK, and see that change. And then maybe I'll change the hardware as well. Let's change it over to a lever handle instead of that doorknob. I could change the hinges or the locks, but I'm going to leave all that the same. I'll select OK, see the change applied, and then down in my edit toolbar, I have an option here to set that as the default. So when I click that option, it will tell me that those defaults have been updated. And if I zoom out, you can see that all of the doors that I had have also updated, and that's because they were also marked as use default. So Chief Architect has dynamic defaults so that when you change the defaults partway through, it will update all of the doors that are pointing to that default. So that's a nice handy way to be able to change multiple objects at once without having to select them all and change them. So now my first floor is pretty well done, and I'm going to zoom out both in 2D and 3D so we can see what we have so far. So now that that shell is complete, I'm going to build my foundation. So the foundation is going to be built based on how the first floor is designed. So it's going to place a foundation wall matching the shell of my exterior. It also will place a foundation wall along any wall that's marked as a bearing wall. So I'm going to select this wall and this wall, open them up, and under structure, I'm going to mark them as bearing walls. And you notice it automatically checked to create a wall footing below. Select OK. So it will also create a wall along those bearing walls, and it's also going to look for different room types. Chief Architect is a room-based program, meaning that the rooms are providing a lot of information as far as how the structure is built. So I'm going to open up this room here, and right now all of the rooms in this plan are marked as unspecified, so it's just going to follow our general room defaults. But you can see we have quite a few different room types, and some of these room types change the defaults as far as our structure. So for instance, if I were to mark an attic room, that's going to remove my flooring and my ceiling because we're not going to be finishing out an attic room. If I were to mark it as a balcony, you can see it changed my living area over to be an excluded. So it's not going to include a balcony in my living area calculation. Same thing for the attic that we looked at earlier. Another one of the options that we have, and this is what we're going to select, is the garage. So there are a couple like this, the garage as well as the slab, patio. They're going to have different options for how the foundation will build. So our garage is going to have a slab foundation under there no matter what we're doing for the rest of our walls. So I'll select OK. You can see it now named that room the garage. So now that all the rooms that are important for our foundation are defined, and we've marked those walls as bearing walls, I'm going to go to my floor tools, and I'm going to select to build foundation. I am going to automatically rebuild, which means that if I make any changes, if I move a wall, if I change a room, it is going to automatically update. And we have a couple of different types of foundations that we can choose. I'm going to build walls with footing, so that's going to be for our crawl space today, but this would also be if we were building a full basement. We have a piered foundation option and a monolithic slab as well. If we wanted to hang the first floor platform inside of those foundation walls, so they're going to hang on the walls rather than bear on top of them, this is where we can select that. We're not going to mess with the slab thickness, that's exactly how we want it to be. And then I'm going to leave the minimum height for the foundation at 37.5 inches. We are defaulting to an 8-inch concrete stem wall, so if we were going to be doing a thicker wall type, we would definitely want to come in here and change over to maybe a 16-inch or even create a new wall type that was exactly how we were planning to build. Notice also in this foundation option, we can adjust the footing. So here we're using a 16-inch wide, 8-inch high footing along all of those walls. We also have different options here for the garage, as I mentioned before. And here under options, we can decide how we're going to be supporting that. So what our rebar, right now we're using a mesh, we can deselect that if we want. So once we've changed everything we want to change, we'll select OK, and it's going to build that foundation. So once this foundation is built, these are walls like any other. So if I change my mind, I'm going to go ahead and delete this wall. And I think actually I want this to be a secondary bearing wall. So I'm just going to grab that wall and extend it across. Then I'll open it up, and I am going to actually mark this as a bearing wall. So what that's going to do is when we build our framing later, it'll allow that framing to lap over top of the foundation wall. So now we're going to go through a similar process, and let's build our second floor. I'm going to go up to my first floor, grab my floor tool, and the first option here is build new floor. So the first thing it's going to ask me is if I want to derive the second floor from the first floor plan. So this is going to take all of my walls on the first floor and it's going to create a copy of them on the second floor. All of my exterior walls, that is. So I'll select OK. I do want to do that, and then I'll make modifications once it's drawn. Then I have the option to choose what the second floor defaults are going to be. So right now the first floor is set to be a 9-foot ceiling, and here on our second floor we have an 8-foot ceiling. And we can choose a different floor finish, and we can modify the floor structure at this point too. So we would want to increase this structure if we're going to be framing with trusses or with something that's going to be thicker than our 12 5/8 structure. And if we wanted to change the floor finish, for instance, if our second floor was going to have mostly carpet or some other material than the first floor, we would want to edit that here. And moldings as well, we're just using kind of a default based molding. If we wanted to add or remove those, we could. And then we can change the materials. I'm going to accept all the defaults, select OK. So in my 2D view, you can see it moved us up to the second floor. We are doing a floor overview here, so this seems like a good time for us to swap into a full overview. I'm going to exit out of here, and instead of that floor overview, which was going to remove our ceiling and eventually any roof that we draw, I'm going to do a full overview so that we can see everything that we've drawn so far, and we'll be able to see the roof later when we draw it. So here we have our second floor built. And you can see that it took all of the wall styles that we had from the first floor and it extended those up to the second floor as well. And now let's take another look at the house, the finished version. So you can see we're not going to be extending all of the walls up to the second floor, so we need to modify these walls so that it's just the interior section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start pulling walls back. Basically get rid of all of our bump outs. And at some point I'm going to need to turn on my reference floor display. So over here I have that reference display, and what this does is it shows all of the walls on the floor below. I can also define more of that information by clicking on the floor that I'm on, which will allow me to specify which floor I'm currently looking at and then which floor I want to reference. So right now I'm automatically referencing a floor, which means whatever floor I was on last is the floor that it's going to reference. But I could also choose to do any other floor, so I could even reference the foundation while I'm on the second floor. I'm going to go ahead and let it be, so I'll select OK. And then with that reference floor display on, now I can just snap right to where that wall is on the floor below. And what I'm going to do, if we turn around, we can see that that's using the board and batten, but actually I want to extend the stone all the way across. So I'm going to grab this stone wall, and I'm going to use my same wall type to grab the same wall and extend it out across so that we have that stone wall all the way to the back there. And now I'm going to pull these walls in for the garage. And those are the wall types that I actually want to use. So I'm going to grab, if we rotate around you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab that vertical panning, or that horizontal paneling wall, and pull it across and pull all these walls in. And then when I pull this wall in, it'll be the wall type that I need it to be. And we'll go ahead and extend this siding wall out, and that'll finish up our second floor walls. Now that I have my second floor done, I'm going to need a staircase to get up to there. So I'm going to go down to my first floor, and I'm going to turn off that reference display, and then I'm going to get into another camera view. So I'm going to use my full camera this time. So that allows me to click and drag inside the home so that it'll pull up a view as though I'm standing inside of it. And I'm going to move that over so that my camera views are both off to the right here. So with our stair tools, we have a couple of different options. I'm going to get into my plan view, grab those stairs. I can just click and it will automatically place a staircase. And if we open this up, it'll tell me that the staircase reaches the next level. So it's going to calculate the distance between the floors, and it's going to create a staircase with the correct number of treads. So in this case we need 18 risers, which is the number that we have. However, instead of just doing a straight staircase, I'm going to do an L-shaped staircase. So there are a couple ways that we can do that. I can draw out the segments individually. So draw one segment, draw another, roughly in the position that they're going to be, and then click in between them to form the landing. If I were to open this up, it would tell me that the steep staircase reaches the next level. So we have 18 risers, or we have 16 risers, but we need 18. There's another way to create an L-shaped staircase. So what I'm going to do is we have this L-shaped option. So this will decide whether or not we want to go clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm going to go ahead and go clockwise. And then we can simply click to place that staircase. And now if I wanted to increase or decrease the number of treads on either section, I can use my edit handles to do so. I'm going to go ahead and accept the default though that splits it right down the middle. And if we open up this staircase, I've actually set my template to have the correct defaults for what I want for my railings. But if we were to look at the railing options, you can see you can adjust the height for both the rail at the stair and at the landing, for whether or not it's on and whether you have a railing on the wall, whether you're going to be using newels and balusters, if it's going to be just open, probably not what you want for stairs, or whether you're going to have panels, which is what I'm using here. I'm just using glass panels. And then if we were using newels and balusters, here's where we could select those balusters, but instead I'm using panels. And we can define the rail style. So if you're going to be doing more like a curved profile, we have options in here where you can select, and instead of accepting the square default, you can replace it with one of the other styles that we have available. So we have quite a few different railing styles. Here's our handrails. So you can see we have a number that you can choose from. I'm going to accept just a square. And in fill style, we can adjust the fill in the plan. But under break line, we can decide whether or not it's going to have a break line where we can see underneath it. And then how far from the first tread does that break line start. So in this case, we don't really have anything underneath that stairs that we need to take a look at, so I'm not going to worry about a break line. And then under style, here's where we can decide whether or not we have a runner, how thick our tread is, whether we even have a tread, if we're showing a walk line showing where the up direction is in our plan, and then whether or not we have a stringer. So I am going to go ahead and turn off the stringer at the wall. Then I'll select OK. You can see the stringer removes. That's the only change that we made. And now I'm just going to grab this staircase and just move it over a little bit. We're actually going to have it go just over top of that doorway. And with that staircase selected, we have a tool down in our Edit toolbar to do an auto stairwell. So that's going to generate a stairwell exactly in the position of the staircase on the first floor. So if we go up to the second floor, you can see that stairwell that was created. All it is it's a room in the shape of the stairs that's an open below, meaning it cuts through that floor platform. Now what I want to do is I want to maximize my headroom. So we have some tools that make it really easy to be able to adjust your headroom to make sure that you're utilizing all the space on the second floor that you can. I'm going to do what's called a backlift cross-section. So we have our cross-section tools here. We have a cross-section elevation, which is more like our outside elevation tool. It's going to look as far in the future as we can. Then we have that backlift cross-section, where I can just clip a section of my house. Now I'm going to zoom in on the staircase, and what I want to do is I'm going to draw a line right where the nose of my tread is. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy that line, and I'm going to use a tool that I used earlier, my transform replicate. I'm going to copy that line, and I'm going to move it in the distance of my headroom. So that would be 6 feet 8 inches, 80 inches for my headroom. Then what I can do is I'm going to draw another line from the very outside edge of my landing over to where my headroom is. So if we open up this line, it'll tell us that the length is 32 and some fraction. So we're going to go ahead and allow that upstairs railing to move over 32 inches. So I'll go to my plan view, select my railing. I'm going to start to move it and hit tab as I begin to move it so that I can move it in the X direction, negative 32 inches. Hit enter. You'll see that move, and if we go back to the cross section, you can see we're just where that headroom needs to be. Now what I'll do is I'm going to use one of my manual dimension tools. It's just a point to point, and draw a dimension out 6 feet 8 inches. Then I'm going to go ahead and save this camera. Up here in my toolbar I have a save active camera, so that way it will be available for me later when I create our construction documents. So now I'm going to exit out of this camera view, we don't need it anymore, and let's move on to creating our roof. And let's take a look at the final design before we do that. So here's the roof that we're going to create, and most of this can be done using our automatic roof tools, meaning that the roof is going to take its direction from the walls that it's bearing on. So to start with, we're going to go to our roof tools, and then build roof. So first off, we're just going to set what the defaults for our roof are going to be. So I'm going to select to build my roof planes, which is going to build a roof plane off of every wall that we have created, every exterior wall. Then I'm going to select to auto rebuild roofs, meaning if I make a change to my walls or my ceiling heights, the roof will follow. Then I'm going to set the default pitch to be a 4 and 12, so we're going to have a relatively shallow roof here today. And I'm going to increase the overhang for both eaves and gables to 24 inches. And under options, we can decide what our eave cut is going to look like, whether or not we're going to have any flashing, and we can establish the structure. Here's where we want to establish what the structure of the roof is going to be. So how thick we're going to be framing our roof. This is for stick framing mostly. So if we go through the structure of the roof, you can see that we're going to be framing at a 9 1/4 lumber. We'll also take a quick look at our truss framing later too, because it's very easy to draw trusses in the software as much as it is to stick frame, which is what these options are for and will be done automatically. We can add in rafter tails, we can change what the ridge cap is, change our gutter, whether or not we're going to even have a gutter, and then what the profile looks like, add in frieze molding, shadow boards, and we can change the default material as well. On the roof styles panel, this is an instructional panel that's going to tell you how you can go about creating these various roof styles. So for instance, with the gable roof, when we click on that, it opens up that section of the help to explain that you can use the Change to Gable Walls Edit button, or in the Wall Specification dialog you can check Full Gable Wall. So we're going to be doing this quite a bit. I'm going to select OK to simply build the roof. So there we have a hip roof. And like I said before, so by default it's just going to draw a roof plane bearing on every exterior wall we have in our plan. And the roof is going to draw at the height that the ceiling of the room is established as. So for instance, if we come down to our first floor, I'm going to take these two bump outs and I'm going to draw what's called an invisible wall or a room divider across both of these rooms and lower the ceiling height. So under structure, I'm going to drop the ceiling height down to, let's do 7 feet. And you'll see that drop down. So the other way that we're going to affect the roof planes is by opening up the walls and telling the roof plane above it how it's going to function. So if we take another look at the full home, you can see these walls need to be gables. We have a gable here and here as well, and then we also have a gable in this section. And changing a roof to a gable roof essentially just means that there's not a roof plane bearing on it. So we also are going to change the two edges on each of our bump outs to gables, which is going to make them effectively shed roofs. So let's start with those. I'm going to open up all 4 of those walls, and under the roof panel of the wall specification, I'm going to select to make them full gable walls. So you can see it'll make them shed roofs. Then I'm going to open up the 2 front walls of those bump outs, and under the roof panel I can affect the pitch. So we're going to drop it down to more like 3 and 12. So there you can see it went a little more shallow. We can also do the same thing in our 3D view. So I'm going to select these 2 walls on my second floor, and we have a shortcut down in the Edit toolbar to change those to gables. Now in this case, I don't actually want this to be a gable, I want it to be a shed. So I'm going to open up this wall, and under the roof panel, I'm going to select it to be a high shed gable wall, so that that shed can come up and simply meet up with that wall. Then we're going to do something very similar over here. I'm going to select this wall and make it a gable, make this one a gable, and make this one a gable. Now what I need to do is open up this wall, and under the roof panel I'm going to make it a high shed. And then I need to adjust the pitch back here. So I'm going to swing around here a little bit in 3D so we can see what we're working on here. So first of all, this needs to be a gable, or what effectively will be a shed. You can see that nice steep roof coming up. We just want to make that more shallow. And we're going to drop it down to a 2 and 12. That's much more shallow. Then if we come around to the front here, I can see I need to make this wall a gable, and the back it looks like needs to be a gable. So again, going to the back, and this time we'll go up to the second floor, make this a gable, and down on the first floor this one needs to be a gable as well. Alright, so now let's swing back around to the front of the house and just make sure there aren't any more changes I want to make. One more. We just need to change these 2 walls to gable as well. Alright, so those are the last automatic changes we're going to make, meaning the last ones that we're going to use the walls to edit the roof planes. Now I'm just going to grab this roof plane, which is this one right here, and I'm going to delete it. And it's going to ask me if I want to turn off auto rebuild roofs. Yes, that is my intention, so now I'm manually editing roof planes. I'm just going to grab this roof plane and extend it out across that bump out area, which just gives us a more seamless ridge line across there. And with that, we finish off our roof design. So with just a few clicks, we've pretty radically changed the roof of this house, and the majority of the work was done for us with Cheap Architect's automatic roof tools. So now that we have our roof and all of our walls are set, the house is ready for framing. So I'm going to go to the framing tools, and I'm going to select Build Framing. So most of the work was already done for us as far as setting up our framing. When we built our walls, we established the structure of the framing at that point. So when we did a 4-inch wall versus a 6-inch wall, we were setting up for 2x4 versus 2x6 framing. And when we looked at that wall definition for several of our walls, you can see where we can adjust that framing if we need to. So I'm going to just come through here. I'm going to do floor and ceiling framing, and again we established that when we built the second floor. We also have some options here, so I'm going to select to build the subfloor for floor 1, and we're going to build it at 16 inches on center. And if we wanted to edit the floor structure, we probably wouldn't want to do so here. You would want to do so before we built the second floor, but this is where we're seeing that structure being built. And let's build the floor framing for the ceiling above floor 1, subfloor for floor 2, and our ceiling framing for above floor 2. Then let's automatically build our wall framing. Again, we're going to be using the wall framing material. If we wanted to frame all of our entire building with the same spacing and thickness, we could do that. It's still going to take the thickness of the wall. Then let's take a look at our openings. So here we have our header sizes, which are dependent on the span of the window. So each window and its span is going to determine how large of a header we're using. And again, when we looked at our window, we took a look at how we can adjust the header on an opening by opening basis as well. So if for a particular opening you're going to be doing a larger header, you would definitely want to go into that specific window or door and specify that. And I'm not going to frame the roof out quite yet. We're going to start by just taking a look at the walls and the floor. And we'll select OK. I'm not going to turn on those layers. We're going to open up a different view that's going to have those layers already turned on. So no, I'm not going to turn them on here. I'm going to open up a new camera view. So one of our camera views is a 3D framing overview. So here's all the framing except our roof framing at this point. And I want our 2D view to reflect the framing as well. So we have plan views set up that will specifically swap over your view to look at whatever you're working on. So in this case, we're going to swap over to our framing floor plan. So here's our floor framing. We also see our wall framing here. And since we're on floor 1, this is the subfloor for floor 2. If we go up to floor 2, we're not going to see any floor framing because there's not a third floor. If we go down to our foundation level, here's where we're going to see the subfloor for floor 1. Now notice how our framing is hanging over top of our foundation walls. When we went and built our foundation, so here's our build foundation options, there we could have chosen to hang the first floor platform. So if we would rather have the framing hang on those foundation walls, we can do that globally in that build foundation, or you can do so on a wall by wall basis. So in the foundation wall, if we look under structure, you can choose to hang the floor platform above on wall, and whether you want it to go to the wall interior or include a ledger will then open up. I'm going to cancel out of, and then remember how earlier we specified this as a bearing wall? So that is why we have our framing lapping over top of it. Now I actually want this framing to go in multiple directions. So we have a joist direction tool where I can establish what direction that framing is going to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag across here so that we can change the direction of the framing in that area. Now because we only have one directive, it's going to change the direction of the joists along that entire floor. And we're not lapping across this foundation wall. So I'm going to open up this section of foundation wall, and under structure I'm going to go ahead and select that to be a bearing wall as well, so we make sure that we're hanging on top of that. Now I'm going to add in another joist direction line in this area, and because we have a bearing wall between them, it knows that that's its dividing line. So we're going to go in this direction until we hit the bearing wall, and then we're going to go in the opposite direction. So these joist direction tools and bearing lines and bearing walls, they make it very easy for us to adjust the framing quickly, have it going in multiple different directions as we need to. So now I'm going to get into a different view. Here in my 2D, I'm going to get into my roof plan view and go up to my second floor, where I'm going to draw a couple of trusses. So here we have our truss tool, and if I just click and drag across the house, it'll draw a truss that will fill the envelope between where the ceiling is and where the roof is. So I'm going to get this into place. Let's place it 24 inches inside the wall. And then I'm going to multiple copy that truss And looking at the multiple copy options, when we select the interval, we have an option for general objects, and then we have a specific interval that we can copy trusses along. So by default, they're set to copy at 24 inches on center. I'm going to select OK, and in order to multiple copy, I'm going to mouse right over the move handle and pull out those copies. So you can see all of the trusses that were placed. And if we open up a specific truss, you can see you can specify the sizing of the cords, whether or not we're going to require that it has that king post. If it's an end truss, whether or not it has an energy heel, drop hip, reduced gable, or attic truss. I'm going to accept everything as it is, but we also can see the truss by selecting it, and down here we can open up the truss detail. So this will allow us to see the envelope of the truss. We can make changes to it here if we want to. And all of those truss details are also contained in our project browser. So the project browser, which you can find right here, is going to be a full snapshot of everything we have in our plan so far. So under CAD details, you can see that truss detail that we have open right now. We only have one type of truss, so at this point we only have one truss detail because all of them are following this exact pattern. These each are contained within CAD detail pages, which are essentially another working blank page that you can draw CAD objects in that will be saved within your plan. We're going to work with schedules here in a minute, and we'll use CAD details for those as well. At this point, I'm going to leave my project browser open, but I am going to reduce its size a little bit. So now to finish off my roof framing, I'm going to go back into the roof framing dialog by going to my build framing. Under roof, I'm going to select to build the roof framing, and what it's going to fill in wherever we don't have trusses. So you can see we have all those trusses still drawn. It didn't draw rafters on top of them, but it placed rafters wherever we don't have those trusses. So if we go down to the first floor, you can see our roof framing, rafter framing for this first floor. Now I'm going to go back to my framing floor plan view. I'm going to go down to the first floor. We can show a wall by wall framing detail by selecting a wall, and down here in our edit toolbar we can open that wall detail. So this is similar to the truss detail that we saw earlier. So here we are seeing two headers above our door and then that fixed side light that we created earlier. If I go back to my floor plan view, and I just zoom in here a little bit, let's go to our floor plan shell. I'm going to select that side light and that door together, and I'm going to make them a mold unit. And now when I open up that wall detail, you can see it's become one consistent framing member. Molding items is also important when we're considering our header size. So when we looked at our framing options earlier, we were looking at the header sizes. The wider our span, the more depth we're going to have in that header. So when we mold items together, it can see the bigger span and it can increase the size of our header to accommodate that. Now another element of our project browser are the wall details. So automatically, without our opening them up, it created a wall detail for every single wall in our plan. Now if I plan to use these wall details, if I go back to that floor plan view, let's say I want to see the corresponding wall details in this floor plan shell. We actually have a layer. So I'm going to open up those layers. These are all of the layers that we have available right now, and the ones that are on in my floor plan shell layer set have a check mark right here showing that they're displayed. I'm going to find my wall label and turn it on. So now if we zoom in, you can see it'll say wall detail 34 corresponding with wall detail 34 here in my plan. Now I'm going to create my exterior elevations. Minimize this, and we're going to exit out of the framing overview. So here in my plan view, I'm going to go to 3D, create auto elevations, all elevations. I am going to turn on the view of cameras in my floor plan view. And if we look at our project browser again, if we go to cross sections, here we have all of our exterior elevations and they're correctly named. If we either double click from here in the project browser or here in the plan, it'll open up that elevation for us. So I'm I'm going to exit out of this one and let's open up our front elevation. So on this one I want to add some dimensions. So one of my automatic dimensioning tools is a story pole dimension. So if we zoom in here, we can see it's automatically found various spots in the home and created a marker to be able to show where those points are. So our highest ridge is at 24.6 feet and it is 173 inches from the top of the second floor subfloor. The particular spots that it is looking for depends upon how we've set our defaults. So in our default settings, one of the dimension tools is the auto story pole. Here you can decide which particular elevations it's going to find. So we're including right now grade level, header, highest ridge, top of garage slabs, top of slab, and top of each subfloor. You can add in a bunch of other items over here simply by selecting them and adding them. You can remove them by selecting them and removing them. So there are a lot of options. You'll want to set this up before you do that auto story poll so that you make sure that you're finding the correct items. But now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and exit out. I don't need to worry about saving it because it already was saved in my project browser. So again, in our project browser, you'll find a folder called Cat Details. This was where we saw that truss detail earlier. Again, these are simply blank pages that you can place notes, CAD details, or schedules in. In fact, there's already a page here by default for schedules. So I'm going to double click to open that up. It's going to open up a blank page. Then under Tools, I'm going to come down to Schedules and click to place. Let's start with Door Schedule. I'll drop that in, and these schedules are customizable. So I'm going to double click to open this up, and the first thing I'm going to do is add in an elevation. And I'm going to select that elevation and move it to the very top. Then I'm going to remove a bunch of other items that I'm not concerned with. We're not using any manufacturers at this point. Remove my code. Everything else I'll go ahead and keep. I'm also going to group similar items, which means that as long as two doors have the same values in all of these columns that are included, they will group together. So then I'll select OK, and I can see an elevation of all of my door styles and the information that I've asked to be included. Now, back in my floor plan, if we choose another view, let's go to our working plan view that we were working in earlier, you can see we now have a call out for all of those doors that correspond to their number on the schedule. And because we mold that door and the side light together, they are showing up as one item. If I wasn't sure where this door was located, if I needed to be able to find that in the plan, I can select that door and come down to my edit toolbar to find the object in the plan. I can then open that up, and if I did not want to include it in the schedule, I can deselect it here or make any changes that I need to. So you can find any item that you have in a schedule if you're not sure where it's located in your plan. Now in X11 we have a new schedule called Wall Schedule that's going to create your wall legend. So all of the walls available in the plan are going to show up in the wall schedule, and they're going to be named based on how we named that particular wall type. So when we renamed the board and batten wall earlier, you can see that that new name is set up here. In addition to schedules, we also have a full material list that you can create. So under Tools, you can create a materials list. You can calculate for a particular area if you're going to be doing something like an addition to a house, or we can just calculate for all floors. So this is going to open up a list of absolutely everything that I have placed in the plan thus far. It'll tell me what floor it's on, how big it is, a general description of what it is that we're looking at, and how much of it there is. And just like with the schedule, if there's something that I'm not sure of, so if I select an option and I just don't know where that option is, we can find the object in the plan and it'll highlight it so that we can edit it if we need to. Now there also is a column for pricing, so you can type in a price for the unit, price per unit, and it'll automatically do a full cost. So here I'll type in a price of, let's say, $4 per unit. It'll automatically calculate that for us, and then if you were to add in prices for all or most of the items, you would see a total cost down here. There also is a display option here in our materials list, so this will determine what categories we have turned on. So we don't have any furniture in this plan, but if we did, we might want to uncheck that. We're not going to be ordering furniture for our client, so we don't need it to show up in our materials list. So anything that's just not applicable to what you're going to be ordering, you can just deselect and trim this down so that it just shows the objects that are relevant. Then when you're done, when you try to exit out, it'll ask you to save it. So you can save that material list. This is just a snapshot of the plan, so you can create multiple material lists depending upon different options. We're not going to save it. I'm just going to exit out of it. So now that we're pretty well finished with the plan, let's go ahead and create the layout page for construction documents. So I'm going to go to File, New Layout. The layout is basically a separate document that allows you to set up your various views on the page before you print. We will go through and send each view to our layout at a particular scale. The size of the image on the page depends upon how large of a page we're planning to print. So I can see the size of my page by going to File, Print, Drawing Sheet Setup. So here I can see that I am set up to print to 24 by 36 inches. So the size of this page here is a 24 by 36 inch print page. We have multiple templates that you can use for your layout, created at various sizes, or you can absolutely create your own. You can also customize the title block for how you want your documents to look. Page 0 serves as a template for all of the other pages. So anything you place on this page will reflect to the others. So this is the page that you'll want your title block to go on, or the page that you will want to edit our title block to match what you want to print. So now that we have a layout page, what I'm going to do is go to open each of the various options. So let's start with our elevations. I'm going to come here to my project browser, come down to my cross sections, and let's just grab that front elevation that we created earlier. Then I'll send it to layout, determine what page that it needs to go on, what scale it's going to be sent at, whether I want to send the entire plan, or whether or not, if I'm zoomed in, if I just want to send that current screen so that I get that zoom rotation as well. And so the scale I'm going to send is 1/4 inch equals a foot. Send to page 4, select OK. And then once it's sent, we can take that view, move it around. We can crop it down if we want to, or expand the crop. Then I can exit out of that elevation view. So anytime I've sent something to layout, I can then just exit out of the view. And yes, I'll want to refresh it each time I do that. So then I'll go to each of my saved plan views. So for instance, we worked with that floor plan view shell, where we have our wall detail label and we have the cross-section views. So I will send this to my layout. Let's send it to page 2. And I sent it at 1/4 inch equals a foot. If I don't want the elevations to show, I may want to crop it down. And in this case, we're showing the wall detail labels. So let's also send a couple of wall details. So I'll open up those wall details, double click to select one, send it to layout, and I want to send it to that same page. So one at a time, we can send each one of those details. You can multi-select these wall details and open them all up at a time, but I think it's handy to just do one at a time and move them around. So as many details as you need. You may not need to have every single wall detail. You may just want to highlight the most important or relevant ones. They can appear on the page, and the label on the wall is corresponding to those details. So I've sent these to layout. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of them. And we also saved a cross section for our stairs. So I'm going to open it up, but I'm also going to rename it because cross section 1 is not very helpful for me. So I'm going to hit F2 to rename it, and I'm going to call it stairs section. So it's open, and I'm going to go ahead and send that to layout. In this case, I actually do want to send just the current screen because I don't need to see the whole plan. I'm just interested in the stairs. I'm going to send it to page 5, and I'm going to send it at 1/4 inch equals a foot. If I send it and that seems really small, then I can select whatever section I've sent, and down here I can just rescale it. So if I decide actually I would like for this to be 1/2 inch equals a foot, I I can easily rescale it so that it seems to match what I'm trying to do. I'll exit out of that cross section. And the only other view that I really want to send is, let's send that 3D view. So I saved a camera view earlier. Let's open that up. So there's our 3D view. I'm going to zoom in on it and rotate so we get a nice good view of this house. Then I'm going to send it to my layout. And in this case, this is not a scaled view. This is a perspective overview. So I'm going to use current screen as image. So it just sends essentially a snapshot of this image. And I'm going to send it to page 1. So this will be kind of the overview for our initial page. So then I can resize it, crop it if I want to. This is a bunch of just white space, so I can crop it down and move it where it needs to go. We can add text in the plan view. We can also add text on this layout. So if I wanted to type in no scale to indicate that this image is not scaled, I can type that in, move it around into view. That's actually going to print large enough because this is a nice big 24 by 36, even though it looks pretty small on this page. So you can see how easy it is to take various views of the house as you're building it in the software, so it's all ready to go by the time you're ready to create your construction documents. So in just a few minutes here, we were able to send views on 4 different pages, and they're scaled and ready to print. So tools like our saved plan views, which have particular corresponding layer sets, so the correct layers are turned on, being able to save cross sections and camera views, and our CAD detail page, which we didn't send our schedule. Let's just go ahead and do that. We have our wall schedule here. Let's just send that to page 3. So there I sent it as an image because it took the last setting, so let's redo that. Send it and make sure that I'm sending it at a particular scale. So it took the whole plan. I actually just want to have the wall legend on here. Maybe I only want to have just the particular wall type and its explanation. So there we have a wall legend all ready to go. So this project browser is a nice handy way to keep everything together. You can just double click to open up each of your views, send it straight to your layout page, and pretty soon you've got your documents all ready to go. And with that, we've finished the plan. So we have several other webinars that will delve more deeply into other aspects of the software. So if you're interested in interior kitchen bath design, we have a kitchen webinar and a bath webinar that will focus on those areas of the home. We also have a remodeling demonstration that will cover how you can adapt the tools in our software for your remodeling project. So as I mentioned, I was working in our Chief Architect Premier version. Many to maybe even most of the features that we use today would only be available in Premiere. So one good example of that would be framing. Anything that I showed in framing is not going to be available in that interiors version. All of the interiors features are contained within the Premiere version, so the interiors is a subset of the Premiere. All new licenses come with a year of support and software assurance, or SSA as we call it. This includes free upgrades to new versions when they're released, also priority technical support, so if you need to call our technical support team for help, download for additional catalogs, so any new library items that we release for the software, including our manufacturer catalogs, and then discounts on additional training options and also additional licenses. You can also rent our software for $199 a month. You can rent on and off as you need it, so if you just need it for a month or 2 here and there, you can do that. Or you can rent until you own it. So if you rent consecutively, eventually you will own the program outright. So thank you so much for attending today. Please feel free to contact us via email or phone. We're always happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.